Hello and good afternoon. So, the film you're about to watch today is called When We Were Kings. It's a documentary film, and we haven't talked about this yet, but it's part of this week's readings in O'Shaughnessy and Stadler. And in those readings, they tell us that structure and form and genre, they all matter, and they all impact how readers engage with texts. Actually, they matter at all three levels of the three-pronged approach: political economy, textual analysis, audience reception. Now, documentary is a very interesting genre. In many ways, as viewers, we feel as if we are being exposed to hidden truth that exists when we watch documentary, although this is not always the case. Documentaries are teaching texts, like the children's books that we looked at last week. They are didactic, and they do seek to tell a very focused and particular story, or maybe to be more precise, a very particular side of the story, and usually it's one that has been told before or that is already known in the popular imagination. When the Who Benefits questions ask us, how could this story be told otherwise? Or when Dr. Rowe tells us in Little Brother, if you want to be in charge of your machines, you have to learn how to write code. Or as I continue to tell you each and every week from this podium, we must become the media to ensure that stories are more just, that the stories that get told, that whom they are told about, how they are told, for whom they are told, they become more equitable, more just, more representative. Documentaries hold these characteristics and principles to be true. They are largely social justice texts. They are protest film. However, like all media, they are not static or fixed, and so, and we've seen this many times throughout history, they can also be used as propaganda. They can be used as texts to promote dominant ideologies rather than to challenge those dominant norms. Now, as a form of protest media or social justice film, documentaries often lack celebrity punch. That celebrity stardom that comes with mainstream Hollywood film. Now, this particular film that you'll watch today, When We Were Kings, is a little bit different. And that might be because of the content or the subject. Ali himself was a celebrity and a star. But because of that, this film has some high caliber celebrity talent. Although I will point out that they are framed differently through the lens of a documentary than they would be through the lens of a Hollywood film. Now, some of you may know or recognize Muhammad Ali, or George Foreman, or the godfather of soul, James Brown, my personal hero and idol. Some of you may not know some other people in the film, but their presence is significant. And they act as what O'Shaughnessy and Stadler call anchors for us. What they do is they let us know as readers that this is in fact a social justice and a protest film. For example, Norman Mailer is a massive countercultural figure in American social history. His role as a voice of the movement of young people in protest in 1960s America is very significant. Or Spike Lee. Now, although this is probably still too old a reference for most of you students here in 2016, many of you were largely born in 1996 or after, which of course is the year where this film comes from. It was released in 1996. Spike Lee's presence in this film also speaks to the element of protest in this film. Lee is a prominent director and social activist, probably most famous and most well known for his 1989 film Do the Right Thing. Now, this is one of the first films to break through into mainstream American media that highlighted race relations in the United States, that spoke to them very frankly about the use of violence and ideology and the repressive state apparatus. That's a term that will come up next week when we look at Althusser. But it's also one of the first films to do this and discuss race relations as told from the perspective of an African American voice. Now, if you haven't seen Do the Right Thing, go home right now. Get it on Netflix. Watch it tonight. Do not live another day without having seen that film. Another anchor we get in this film that's worth knowing about is Howard Cosell, one of the most famous and prominent sports broadcasters in the world at this time. He himself was a celebrity, and we'll see the way in which Ali speaks to him and plays with him. And so the way in which that dialogue goes back and forth between Cosell, who largely represents the sporting world and the ideology of the sporting world, and mainstream media, and then the playfulness of Ali back and forth with him. Now, another drawback or limiting agent, remember, structure impacts how dominant ideologies get made and maintained. We talked about this briefly last week when discussing Marx. We'll talk about it again next week when we explore Gramsci and Althusser, when we go over the making and the marking of and the maintaining of social when we go through the making and the marking and the maintaining of social inequity through ideology. So another drawback or limiting agent is structure, is in that documentaries often struggle to get produced and promoted as they're largely removed from the Hollywood machine. Remember, they are social justice texts when they're done properly, and this film is no different. When We Were Kings was released in 1996, but director Leon Gast spent decades, literally decades, shooting the film, editing the film, but also financing the film, getting the money to put this film together and have it actually released on a mainstream level. Now, one of the things that separates When We Were Kings from, some of the more common attributes that go with the documentary genre is the commercial and public success that this film achieved that you'll watch today. It won the 1996 Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature. Now, that's worth noting, Best Documentary Feature, not short, but feature film. It grossed almost $3 million at the box office. Now, in 1996, that was good enough for 173, the 173rd top grossing film of the year. But let's put that in context. The top 100 grossing films of the year in 1996 all grossed over $15 million. And the number one film that year in 1996, Independence Day, grossed over $300 million. So 100 times more than what this film did. But unlike the top grossing films, When We Were Kings was independently financed, as we said. It was released without the backing of the Hollywood machine. And just what does the Hollywood machine do? Well, let's take a look at for an example of comparison. Paramount, one of the bigger film studios, put out 17 films in 1996. And all of them, except for one, which was The Kids in the Hall, Brain Candy, grossed more than $7 million that particular year. So 17 films came out, 16 of those 17 grossed more than $7 million. The only one not to gross was Kids in the Hall, Brain Candy, which grossed almost the same amount as When We Were Kings, only about $100,000 difference between the two. Even in that particular year, if we look at the quality of the film that's coming out or just how powerful the machine is, Beavis and Butthead Do America grossed $63 million that year for Paramount. And even a film like A Very Brady Sequel grossed $21.5 million. So the Hollywood machine works. MGM Studios, another massive film studio, put out 13 films in 1996. 10 of those films grossing more than $7 million, and all of them except for one grossing more money than When We Were Kings. Some of these hits that grossed more than $7 million include Biodome and All Dogs Go to Heaven Too. And the only film that grossed less than When We Were Kings was It's My Party, but it only showed in 29 theaters for the first weekend, and it still grossed $600,000. In comparison, Independence Day showed the first weekend in more than 3,000 theaters across the United States. And When We Were Kings, again, although independently financed without the backing of the machine, well, one of the reasons why it's a little bit different from other documentaries was some of the success that it had. Again, the success commercially, $3 million, a top 200 film, the success with the reviews that it got, the fact that it won an Academy Award, but it also showed in 1,500 movie theaters across the United States in this first weekend. Okay, what about the content? The film itself is about Muhammad Ali, and it's about a boxing match between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman for the heavyweight title in 1974 in Zaire, which is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. This particular fight is often referred to as the Rumble in the Jungle. Now, ask your parents, ask your grandparents. This fight was a very, very big deal at the time. We're talking about a moment in American social and cultural history. Scratch that. We're talking about a moment in global history, right? When being the heavyweight champion in boxing was more than just a sports title or award. This is the time when the heavyweight champion of the world, the boxing heavyweight champion, carried as much cultural capital, remember that word? As much cultural capital as the President of the United States. Right? Or as whoever the top grossing film star at the time was. All right? To put it, I guess, in context, the heavyweight champion of the world was bigger than Kanye, was bigger than a Kardashian. Right? It had a lot of punch to be the heavyweight champion. No pun intended. But remember, folks, this is pre-internet. This is pre-globalization. This is pre-satellite television. This is largely even pre-cable. And from a sporting standpoint, this is before LeBron, before Kobe, before Magic, before Jordan. Ali was bigger at this exact moment in history than all of those global sports icons put together. And without television, without the internet, many people listened to this fight on the radio, okay? On the radio. So 1974. But film is about more than that. This film is about race. It's about religion. It's about war. It's about protest. It's about social justice, global politics, colonialism, imperialism, ideology, discourse, representation. In short, it's perfect for our course, media, culture, and society, because it's a film about doing the right thing. I will say no more. I will now let the film tell you the story of Muhammad Ali. And in many ways, it will also explain to you, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the story, why the world reacted the way it did this weekend to the news of Muhammad Ali's passing. If you feel moved by the film today and you want to know more, I'd make two recommendations for further reading or sources. The first is you'll see a little bit of music in the film today, James Brown being one of the artists, but it's part of a soul music festival that was also accompanied the fight. So there was the fight itself, and there was a massive concert that went along with it, a massive festival, and it's often referred to as the Black Woodstock. And there's a documentary film called Soul Power that came out in 2008 that really highlights the music element of this particular festival and this particular time and moment in Zaire, but also how it connects back to everything else going on in the United States and race relations. So what I would say is if you're interested, go watch that film. You could probably Netflix it as well. There's also a book called King of the World by David Remnick. In my opinion, it's the best Muhammad Ali book ever written. It's one of the best books I've ever read, actually. And it really explores all the backdrop to Muhammad Ali's life. The 2 decades prior, really, to this particular film and this particular fight in 1974. It goes through all of Ali's experiences growing up as a child, but not just in Kentucky growing up, but also what happens to Ali at the Olympics and all of his early fights, what happens as he joins the Nation of Islam, and all sort of the cultural context of America, but seen through, I guess, maybe the eyes of Ali and Ali's life moments. Really a brilliant book. It's worth reading. It's not an academic book. It's written by a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, David Remnick. It's spectacular. And if anybody who has an interest in politics, in race relations, in sport, or in Ali, would really enjoy this book. So if you need a gift for somebody, there you go. I don't know David Remnick. I get no cut from that. It's just something worth pointing out. So lastly, what I just want to say today is Ali's passing this weekend reminds us that every text has the potential to be powerful. It can continue to retell dominant ideologies. It can reinforce stereotypes and inequity, or it can be a moving agent for change. Ali's still as important today in 2016 as he was in 1974, as he was in 1968, and as he was even decades before that. The film gives us an entry point to look at media, culture, society as it all comes together in a very real way for many of us today. That is all. Please enjoy the film. I will see you Wednesday, and of course, Ali Boumaye.